Okay, hello class. For this recording, we're going to talk about target setting. Okay, so this is the first recording out of a series of recording that will encapsulate our topics in Module 3. Okay, so for this recording, let us talk about constructive alignment. Okay, so as you see on your screens right now, constructive alignment is a design for teaching in which intended student learning or learning targets and expressions of student learning are clearly stated before instruction. Okay? NTU furthered the point by stating that the teacher and assessment activities are designed to enable students to achieve those outcomes, etc., etc. Okay? So, class, whenever you enter a classroom, okay, you cannot enter it or you cannot begin teaching without planning the learning experiences. Okay? So in order to plan the learning experiences, gumagawa tayo ng lesson plans. And as you all know right now, that in order to create a lesson plan, you first need to have objectives of the lesson. Okay? In our previous lessons, we have talked about selecting which target types we're going to use and kung saan natin i-connect yung mga target types na yon sa mga assessment methods. Okay? But now, our main problem is actually getting the learning targets. Okay? Saan ba natin kukunin yon? Of course, sa curriculum guide natin kukunin iyon. However, pag walang curriculum guide, okay, what we first need to look at is how can we actually construct our learning targets. Okay, so one of the approaches in designing those learning targets is the use of constructive alignment. The idea behind constructive alignment is that as teachers, we must design teaching that allows a student to demonstrate or to show the skills that they have gathered throughout the planned lesson. Okay? So, yung pinaka-idea na gagawin mo, mag-set ka ng objective that can actually move the students into showing their skills. That also involves creation of assessment methods that use precisely that. Okay? So, in more technical terms, basically, ang constructive alignment, ang gusto niya ay mag-focus tayo sa mga more complex targets like skill targets and product targets. Okay? So, one of our references, particularly ang Charles Sturt University, sabi nila, there are 4 steps to constructive alignment. Okay? The first step is identify the components of the learning outcomes. What this means is, kapag meron kang learning outcomes, paano mo pa hahati-hatiin yung mga iyon? Okay? Because most of the time, learning outcomes are still broad. Ano pa yung mga step-by-step na isiset mo to achieve those learning outcomes? Now, for those who wanting to apply in DepEd, you do not need to worry so much about that. Because ang curriculum guide po, siya na po yung nagbibigay ng mga actual components para sa ating learning outcomes. Okay? Pag-uusapan natin yon in a bit. But after you have set those learning outcomes, you will now develop the assessment. Okay? The assessment on this particular outcomes. Paano kaya maa-achieve ng student yung outcomes na yon? And of course, paano mo iti-test kung yung achievement ba ay talagang naabot na nila? Doon ka na magde-design ng assessment methods. Okay? The third step would be to plan the learning experiences. The idea here is that when you make learning experiences, dapat daw siya ay student-centered and gumagamit ng active learning. We have to recall that active learning is also known as learning by doing, which is proposed by John Dewey way back when. But the idea here, again, students should be at the center of learning. They should be the ones to demonstrate their skills and their products. Okay? And of course, if that is our aim, ang mga learning experiences ay sumusuporta doon sa aims na iyon. Okay? And then number 4, dito ka na magkakaroon ng evaluating. Okay? What you need to remember is that when you evaluate, you need to have a criteria. Okay? So, kapag magpapa-performance task ka, ang criteria na ginagamit natin dyan would be a rubric. Okay? However, if you're going to use more objective tests like multiple choice test, okay, true or false test, ang criteria na gagamitin mo dyan ay nakabase sa, of course, answer key. Okay? And then, of course, for the final evaluation, usually mga criteria ay mga logic-based. Okay? Katulad ng ginagamit natin ngayon sa UEP. Logic-based siya in the sense na pag ang grade mo, ang transmitted grade mo ay 75 or above, you are passed. Pag nakakuha ka ng 75 below, then you have failed. Okay? That is a logic criteria. Okay? So usually, as a teacher, kapag focus lang tayo sa isang lesson, ang mga criteria lang na tinitignan natin ay, of course, answer key and the rubric. Yung dalawa lang yun po, teachers po ang gagawa. Yung logic criteria, usually nasa institution po iyan. Pag nasa DepEd po kayo, diba, meron kayong mga ranges. Ano po yung mga range ng nasa with honors, with high honors, with highest honors? Okay? Hindi naman po kayo magbibigay ng range na yon. Yung DepEd po. Okay? So that is basically the stages in doing constructive alignment. Okay? So again, the main idea here, ang pinaka-goal mo dito as teacher is, of course, use student-centered assessments to assess student-centered learning targets. Okay? Kasi nga, what you want to do is to begin from those learning objectives. Okay? So this next slide shows us an example of how different factors for constructive alignment are actually connected. In figure 1, you'll see there that you have your intended learning outcomes. Okay? This is connected to teaching and learning experiences and of course connected to assessment and feedback. Okay? Now, figure 2 shows us an example of those connections. Okay? Sa figure 2, makikita ninyo that is nag-start tayo sa ILO, intended learning outcome, would be to analyze languages. The assessment would be an essay. And of course, ang mga teaching and learning activities niya would be how to write an essay, and how do you analyze your particular context or passage. Okay? What you need to remember on this part is that whenever you plan intended learning outcomes, you cannot just set it and then saka mo isipin yung learning activities and then yung assessment. Okay? Usually, sabay-sabay mong iniisip yan. Bago mo pa isulat sa lesson plan, ang isang intended learning outcome, iniisip mo na agad. Anong assessment kaya yung gagamitin ko for this learning outcome? Ano kayang teaching activity? Kasi pag wala ka maisip, chances are, i-reject mo yung nagawa mong intended learning outcome. Okay? So, yun po ang constructive alignment. Okay? So, nababago-bago po yan lahat depending on the 3 considerations that you put in the learning plan. Okay? The next one would be the K-12 assessment guidelines. Particularly, we're going to talk about the 3 terms that are found in your curriculum guides. Okay? Sa curriculum guide po ng DepEd, meron kang 3 terms na makikita doon. You have content standards, performance standards, and then learning competencies. Now, let's start with content standards. Sabi dito, ang content standard daw ay mga essential knowledge and understanding na dapat alam ng students mo. Okay? What you need to understand here is that ang content standards po ay nagbabago-bago, depende sa strand, depende sa course, depende sa grade. Okay? Essentially, ang gusto mo lang masagot ng content standards ay what should the learners know? Okay? So, medyo broad po ito. But still, it gives you a general idea on what knowledges, what topics should you include in your lesson for the entire course. Okay? Next, you have performance standard. Okay, sorry. Let me go back to content standard. If we try to connect this with our previous lesson on target setting, okay, what you need to understand is sa content standard, usually nanggagaling karamihan, if not all, of your knowledge targets and reasoning targets. Kasi nga sabi dito, di ba? Knowledge and understanding. So obviously, if you are looking to set the base targets for your learning plans, dito ka titingin sa content standards. Okay? Then we have performance standard. Sa performance standard naman, dito mo makukuha yung karamihan ng iyong skill target and product target. Kasi ang focus ng performance standard ay mga abilities and skills that your students are to demonstrate in relation sa content standard and sa 21st century skills. Dito ka na mag-a-apply ng knowledge. Meaning, for example, kung ang content standard mo ay to be able to identify the parts of speech. Okay? Sa performance standard, doon ka na magsasalita ng isang speech while observing the prevalence or the existence of the parts of a speech. That's one example. Okay? So again, ang pinaka-emphasis po ng performance standard ay products and performance. Okay? Kaya meron tayong mga performance task, meron tayong mga products or projects usually na nire-require sa end of the semester. Ang isa sa pinakasikat na products na nire-require sa academic field would be obviously mga researches. Okay? So, additionally, sabi ng DepEd, ang performance standard daw ay nakakasagot ng 5 questions. The 5 questions you see on your screens right now. Okay? So, sabi dito, question 1 basically asks, okay, what are the learner's skills in relation to the knowledge that they have gained? Okay? So, ano daw yung mga aasahan mo na kaya nilang gawin mula sa kanilang mga natutunan? Okay? So, it's as simple as that. So, pag nagturo ka ba ng research, aasahan mo din ba na makakagawa sila ng research? Okay? Next would be usually the degree. Okay, this talks about the degree. Number 2, gaano sila kagaling sa paggawa ng isang skill? Okay? So, paggagawa ba sila ng isang essay? Dapat ba walang spelling mistakes? Dapat ba cohesive ang bawat paragraph? Okay? Pag magsusolve ba sila ng mathematics problem, dapat ba walang erasure sa kanilang formula? Dapat ba tama lahat ng kanilang mga arithmetic operations? Okay? That is question number 2. Question number 3 would be, how can the students apply their knowledge in different situations? Okay? So usually, sa reasoning targets natin, ito na yung basically, hindi pala sa reasoning targets. Sa skill targets natin, ito na yung basically gagawin na nila into different situations yung kanilang natutunan. Kung number 1, okay, kung ano yung kaya nilang gawin. Number 3, paano pa nila gagamitin yung iba pang, sa iba pang paraan yung kanilang natutunan. And number 4 would be the authenticity of their skills. Okay? As a teacher, tinuturuan namin kayong gumawa ng kung ano-anong components ng isang classroom. Okay? Because ang context noon would be kayo ay magtatrabaho sa DepEd. Yun ang gagawin nyo in your real life careers. So, ganun din daw po sa performance standard. Okay? Dapat po yung mga skills doon ay usable sa kanilang real life. And of course, number 5 would be the tools na gagamitin nila. The tool that we are using right now is YouTube. Okay? So, dapat daw marunong yung bata na gumamit ng tools aside from the skills that they are expected to demonstrate. But of course, we can always assume that part of a skill of a learner would be the proper usage of the tools in demonstrating the said skills. Okay? So, yun po yung 5 tanong na dapat daw ay sinasagot ng ating performance standard. Okay? And the third term that we're going to use or that DepEd uses is learning competency. Sabi dito, these are the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students should be able to demonstrate in every lesson. Okay? So, ito yung pinaka-bite-sized. Ito yung pinaka-specific sa 3 terms na ginagamit ng DepEd. Kasi po yung content standards and then yung performance standard, magka-level sila when it comes to generality. Okay, ang hirap pala i-pronounce yun. Okay? However, yung learning competency ay nasa bandang baba nila. Okay? Kumbaga magbabranch siya pababa kasi ang learning competency ay a combination of both, but Very specific na gagawin ng bata sa isang lesson or learning experience. Okay? So for example, okay, kayo, kailangan daw, marunong kayong gumawa ng lesson plan. So sa week 1, may mga learning competency yan. Number 1, I should be able to identify the parts of a lesson plan. Should be able to differentiate the different figures of speech. Kapag English, should be able to add or subtract similar fractions sa mathematics. All of those things, all of those objectives are very specific. Okay? As you can see here, okay, ang learning competency natin, sila yung usually nilalagay natin sa objective ng bawat lesson plan. Kasi remember, ang objective ng lesson plan natin ay specific. Okay? Ang learning competency ay mas specific kaysa doon sa dalawang standards na nabanggit. Okay? So, when you go out of the DepEd context, okay, yung mga terms na competency, objectives, and outcomes ay nagkakaroon ng ibang meaning. Kaya minsan, nakadepende sa iyong institution kung paano nila gamitin itong mga terms na to. But one of the definitions as given by Hartel and Fogading in 2004, ito po yung tatlo. The first is competency. Sabi nila, ang competency daw ay yung mga knowledge and skills na kayang gawin ng graduates ninyo. Okay? So, for example, sa UEP, ang graduates ng College of Teacher Education dapat ay alam ang cognitive development theories. Or expand natin, dapat daw alam nyo ang iba't ibang development theories. That is belonging to your competency. Competency as a graduate of the course. Okay? Kasi ang objective class, okay, you'll see there, this is the larger goal of the course or program. Okay? Isa sa mga goals ng CTE would be to become a center of excellence. Okay? Now, this may or may not affect you as graduates, but as you can see, ang objective po ay ito po yung pinupush ng institution, not only to their graduates but to the program itself. Okay? So usually sa UEP po, ini-embody ito sa UEP mission. Okay? Itong objectives kasi they are very general statements. Okay? And then finally, you have the definition of outcomes. Okay? Kapag meron ka pong competency, bago mo ma-achieve yung competency na yon, nahahati-hati po yun sa iba't ibang outcomes. So for example, students should be able to demonstrate knowledge on the different developmental theories in education. That is your competency, very general. Sa outcomes, pwede mo sabihin, students should be able to identify the stages of Piaget's cognitive development theory. Okay? Students should be able to differentiate the stages of the psychosocial development theory of Erik Erikson. Okay? Students should be able to differentiate norms versus morals. All of those things are quite specific, but they build up, pag lahat yan, nagsama-sama, they build up your competency. Okay? On the other hand, ang competency ay nahahati into different outcomes. Okay? So, ang pinaka-idea po nun, competency is for the graduates. Okay? Outcomes ay parts ng competency. And yung objective ay nakahiwalay na aim ng isang institution. Okay? Minsan, yung objective ng institution mag-a-under sa competency. Minsan hindi, nakahiwalay. But what you need to understand here, competency is for the graduates. Objectives is for the institution. And outcomes is connected to competency as, sabi mo na lang, parang anak siya ng competency. Okay? So that is competency, outcomes, and then sa kabila yung objectives. Okay, this is according to Hartel and Fogading. Okay, now on separate references, okay, meron din tayo ibang definition. Ang sabi nila dito, according to Macmillan and Witte, Okay? Ang competency daw can be called standards or educational goals. Okay, yung standards, sabi dito, these are statements on what students should know and do in different areas and in different grade levels. Okay? Meron din daw po kasing 4 na uri ng standards. As you can see here, mapapansin ninyo andyan yung content standard and performance standard. Okay? And then meron tayong developmental standard and grade level standard. Okay? Kung papansin ninyo, hindi po gumagamit ang DepEd ng developmental and grade level standards. Okay? Kasi po, yung content standards natin ay naka-design na to be grade level specific. As we have defined earlier in content standards ng DepEd, iba ang content standards ng grade 1 sa grade 2, grade 2 sa grade 3. So that in itself embodies the idea of having grade level standards. Okay? When we talk about developmental standards naman, okay, we have to understand that the K-12 curriculum is designed in a spiral approach. Meaning, kung ano yung napag-aralan ng learners ng grade 1 ay mas mapapalalim at mapapalawak pag-aaralan na ulit nila ito sa grade 2. Okay? Yung mga lessons sa grade 3, mas napalawak yung mga lessons sa grade 2, etc., etc. It becomes more and more complex as the students develop. Okay? So kahit wala tayong explicit na developmental standards, yun ay naka-embed na. Yun ay nakalagay na as a concept sa pagpaplano ng ating K-12 curriculum guide. Kaya po ang ginagamit na lang natin ay content standard and performance standard. Okay? Now, punta naman tayo kay Wite. Sabi niya, ang educational goals daw ay kapareho ng competency. Ang definition kasi ng operational goals ay basically kung ano yung magagawa ng mga students sa isang extended period of time. Okay? So, kung ano yung alam nila at kung ano yung magagawa nila. And they can be written into general or specific terms. Okay? So, ang educational goal mo ay nahahati sa mga educational objectives. Ang educational objectives na kasi ay pwede mo na yung i-connect sa learning competency ng DepEd. Kasi sabi dito, educational objectives are more narrow, talking about student performance, that can be completed in just a single unit. Okay? That implies na ang objectives mo po ay medyo narrow na siya. However, you can still divide educational objectives into learning targets. Okay? Kasi po, sa isang unit po, di ba? Sabi dito, a unit of study. Sa isang unit kasi marami ka na rin pinag-aaralan. Okay? So, ang educational objectives, pwede mo pa rin siyang hatiin, i-boil down into different learning targets. Okay? So, this slide gives us an example of different types of educational objectives. As you can see here, they are specific in the way na nakalagay na dyan kung ano yung mga pag-aaralan nila. Okay? Yung iba, meron na ring degree. Okay? Marami ring topic na covered. This is an example of educational objective. Okay? Now, on this slide, what you see is the hierarchy of instructional planning. Okay? So, ang pinaka-broad at ang pinaka-una mong kailangang i-establish would be your goals. Okay? Sa pinaka-taas po, yung goals. Okay? And then, after goals, hatiin mo siya into objectives. And then, after objectives, hatiin mo siya into learning targets. Ganun daw po yung hierarchy kapag ginamit natin yung mga terms ni Wite. But then again, you always have to go back to how your institution uses these different terms. Okay? Kasi nga, kaya minsan nagkakaroon ng kaguluhan. Kasi si Institution 1, maaaring iba yung paggamit sa goals. Si Institution 2, maaaring iba din. Okay? But what you have to understand is, whenever you set targets, dapat meron kang pinaka-general na goal that can be divided into sub-goals for each unit, for each subject, Okay? And then, yun ay dapat nahahati sa learning targets. Just to give you an example, okay? One of your goals is that your students should be able to become competent in content and pedagogical and technological knowledge. Okay? So, ano yung objectives mo? Kailangan magaling sila sa content, magaling sila sa kanilang specialization, magaling sila sa math. Pag math major sila, magaling sila sa science. That's one objective. Pangalawang objective, dapat alam nila yung mga nangyayari sa classroom, mga pedagogical knowledge katulad ng pag-intindi sa learning styles ng bata, katulad sa proper connections ng assessment methods sa mga targets, okay, etc., etc. So, under sa mga objectives na yan, pwede mo pa ulit silang hati-hatiin. Sa mathematics, for example, kapag magaling ka daw sa math, ano yung mga pag-aaralan mo? Dapat magaling sila sa algebra, magaling sila sa geometry. Sa science, dapat magaling sila sa mga etymology ng bawat scientific branches. Okay? Alam nila yung mga parts ng isang cell. Okay? Sa English, alam nila yung mga literary works. All of those are under learning targets. And of course, pag kaya mo pang gawing specific, kailangan mo pang gawing specific. Again, when we when we set learning targets, we have to recall na ang ginagamit natin ay yung SMART framework. Okay? However, ngayon kasi, meron ng bago na naidagdag sa SMART framework. Okay? Actually, hinahanap ko siya in an educational context pero wala. Nakalagay siya into managerial context. Okay? So, alam na po natin SMART. Ang pag-usapan na lang po natin ay yung evaluate and revise. Okay? So, sabi dito, kapag nakaset na daw tayo ng SMART objective natin, kailangan po natin siyang i-evaluate. Okay? Because when we evaluate, we ask ourselves, naabot ba natin yung objectives? Are the objectives actually following the SMART framework? Na-achieve ba siya ng bata? Okay? Na-achieve ko ba siya? Na-parating ko ba? Okay? Yung importance and yung pag-abot ng objectives as a teacher. Yung methods ko ba sa pag-assess ng objectives ay tama? All of those things are the things you ask when you evaluate your objectives. And of course, pag meron ka nakitang mga problems, you will revise the evaluations. Okay? What this additional 2 letters add to the SMART framework is the sense of constant improvement. Kasi after ka gumawa ng isang lesson, pag ginamit mo yung E and R, chances are, kapag ituturo mo ulit sa susunod na klase mo, mas magiging effective. This is for this, the same concept na kapag ituturo mo yung isang lesson sa first subject mo, sa first class mo, medyo may hindi pa planchado lahat. Pero, habang tinuturo mo siya sa mga susunod na klase, mas dumadali yung pagtuturo. Mas gumaganda at gumaganda. Ganun po yung idea sa evaluate and revise. A constant improvement for your targets. Okay? So, ito daw yung mga dapat mong itanong when you revise objectives. Number 1, okay, what should we change about the upcoming goals and what should remain the same? Okay? Sa mga objectives mo, ano pa yung pinaka-connected talaga? Kasi class, kahit may learning competency po ang curriculum guide, ang goal mo pa rin as a teacher is to use the SMART model to have a more customized learning competency, to have a more customized learning objectives para sa iyong klase. Okay? So, sa mga nagawa mo na yon na mga mas more customized, more specified na objectives, ano kaya yung babaguhin? Ano yung i-retain? Okay? Pangalawa, paano kaya ka makakuha ng mas magandang results ng assessment next time? Okay? And of course, pangatlo, kailangan mo tanungin, tama ba yung assessment type mo? May mga metrics ka ba? May mga items ka ba na pwede pang idagdag para mas representative yung iyong assessment tool sa pag-achieve ng objectives? And number 4, okay, let's contextualize this in an educational part. Anong mga iba pang resources yung gagamitin mo para mas ma-achieve yung iyong objectives? Okay? Kasi hindi naman tayo nagdadagdag ng tao. Okay? Ang ginagawa natin, nagdadagdag tayo ng resources when it comes to the classroom. Okay? So, yun daw po yung mga itatanong natin when it comes to revising your objectives. Okay? So, again, just to have a summary, okay? Remember that when you set objectives, dapat iniisip mo na rin agad. How do you assess those objectives in a way na makaka-demonstrate ng skills yung iyong mga learners? Okay? And then, of course, when you are setting objectives, you begin from the most broad and then you go down to a more specific area of your learning. Sa DepEd, you don't need to worry about that too much because you already have content standards and performance standards and, more importantly, learning competencies for each lesson. Okay? And then, ang gagawin mo as a teacher, itong mga learning competencies ay kailangan mong i-rephrase, i-customize, i-specify sa iyong klase using the smarter framework. Okay? Again, hindi na lang tayo smart. Dapat meron na tayong smarter. Okay? Yung smart, gagamitin mo yan sa pagsiset ng objectives. Yung yung ER, gagamitin mo to further improve your practice. Okay? So, yun po yung pinaka-idea ng first recording natin. So, that is all for this recording. And, yeah, I hope you enjoy your day. I'll see you when I see you. Bye, class!